How in the world does someone go from being a fan in the crowd to a star on the stage? You see, in the wild days of rock, especially in the 60s and 70s, the backstage scene was a world of its own. It had its own rules and its own celebrities. Some people were so good at navigating this world that they became famous themselves. And believe it or not, one of the most bizarre bands in history was formed entirely this way. And their producer was a music legend you would never expect. 1. Pamela Des Barres. Let's start with the queen of the scene, Pamela Des Barres. If you were a rock god in the late 60s or 70s, you knew her. She was the most famous of the groupies, or as she called them, rock and roll muses. She was known for her very close relationships with some of the biggest names in history. We're talking Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones, Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, and Keith Moon of The Who. She was right there in the inner circle, traveling with these bands and living a life most fans could only dream of. But here's the kicker. Pamela didn't just want to be on the sidelines. She had her own creative spark. She was a writer, an artist, and she wanted to perform. She was living on the Sunset Strip, right in the heart of the action, and she had a wild idea. What if all the famous women who were known for their connections to the bands formed a band of their own? It was a crazy idea, but she knew just the person to help her pull it off. You see, Pamela's real genius was in documenting her life. She kept detailed diaries of all of it. Later on, she would turn these diaries into a best-selling book called I'm With the Band. That book itself was a career move based on her relationships, and it made her a household name. But before the book, she had her sights set on music. It's pretty wild to think that these women, who were famous just for being around the scene, decided to step into the spotlight themselves. But Pamela was the leader, and she started to gather her group. And our next star was one of the first people she brought into the fold. 2. Linda Sue Parker. One of the first people Pamela brought into her new group was Linda Sue Parker, better known as Miss Sparky. Linda was another major figure in the Los Angeles rock world. She was also known for her intimate ties to famous musicians and was a core part of that wild Sunset Strip crowd. She wasn't just a fan, she was an insider. She had been part of the so-called freak scene in places like Laurel Canyon, which was all about experimental art, communal living, and very, very wild parties. When Pamela Des Barres had the idea to form a band, Miss Sparky was a natural fit. She had the connections, she had the personality, and she had the desire to be more than just a face in the crowd. She joined up with Pamela, and they started to build a lineup. You see, this wasn't just going to be a gimmick. They wanted to make real, experimental music that captured the chaotic energy of their lives. Miss Sparky brought that authentic freak vibe to the project. What many overlooked is that these women weren't trying to be polished pop stars. They wanted to be the opposite. But a band needs more than just two members. They needed a full group of women who all shared the same strange background. And what many overlooked is just how quickly they found them. The next member to join was just as connected as they were. 3. Lucy McLaren. The next member of this growing group was Lucy McLaren, who the scene knew as Miss Lucy. She was another key part of that 1960s Hollywood freak scene. She was living the life, known for her relationships with various musicians and for being at the center of all the parties and happenings on the Sunset Strip. She was often seen with the biggest stars, right there as rock history was being made. Like Pamela and Linda, Miss Lucy used her intimate ties and her position as a scene insider to grab this new opportunity. She wasn't going to just watch from the wings anymore. She joined the band, bringing her own unique style. The thing nobody tells you is that this was a revolutionary idea at the time. These women were taking their label as groupies and turning it into a badge of honor, a source of power. They were creating their own fame instead of just borrowing it. Miss Lucy was a huge part of that. The group was starting to look less like a collection of fans and more like a real band. But the band, which they would soon become famous for, was still missing a few key pieces. Their next member, Miss Christine, would bring a whole new level of insider connection to the group. 4. Christine Furka. Christine Furka, or Miss Christine, was the next woman to join this strange new band. Her story was a little different. She was a groupie, yes, but she had an actual job in the music world. She worked as a governess, or nanny, for the children of Frank Zappa. This meant she was living inside the home of one of rock's most brilliant and bizarre minds. Here's the wow factor. Frank Zappa's house in Laurel Canyon was not a normal home. It was a notorious, sprawling hub for musicians, artists, and weirdos. It was a creative tornado with 24/7 recording sessions, strange art projects, and a constant stream of famous visitors. Because Christine was living there, she was surrounded by creativity and music all the time. She had her own relationships with rockers who passed through the Zappa house. When Pamela's group started to form, Christine was the perfect bridge. She had the backstage credibility, and she had a direct line to a potential producer. Her connections were, to put it mildly, top tier. She could walk right up to Frank Zappa and pitch the idea. The band was almost complete. They had the leader, the insiders, and the direct link to a music legend. 5. Sandra Liano. Next to join the group was Sandra Liano, who became known as Miss Sandra. She was also deep in the Los Angeles freak scene, a term for the wild, experimental art and music culture of the time. She was another woman who was famous for her personal connections to musicians and her presence at every major event. She was a core member of that inner circle, known for her distinctive style. She joined the band, which was now calling itself the GTOs, for Girls Together Outrageously. Sandra, like the others, was parlaying her lifestyle and her romantic history into a real shot at a music career. What many overlooked is that this wasn't just a fun project. They were about to get a real record deal. Frank Zappa, the boss of Miss Christine, had seen the group's wild energy and decided to do something no one expected. Zappa decided he was going to produce their album. This was a massive deal. The GTOs weren't a typical band. They were more of a happening, a piece of performance art. They didn't write radio-friendly pop songs. They created strange, spoken-word pieces and chaotic chants over experimental music. This was perfect for Zappa, who loved anything that broke the rules. But the group still needed one more burst of energy. 6. Mercy Fontenot. Mercy Fontenot, or Miss Mercy, was an iconic figure on the scene and a key addition to the GTOs. She had a very distinct look and a powerful personality. She was well known for her relationships with bands like The Byrds and other major players in the LA folk rock and psychedelic scenes. She had a reputation for being one of the most out-there personalities on the Strip, which is saying a lot for that time and place. When she joined the GTOs, she brought a serious level of stage presence. She wasn't just a fan, she was a performer, waiting for a stage. The thing nobody tells you is that the GTOs weren't really singers or musicians in the traditional sense. They were performance artists. They did spoken word, skits, and wild, chaotic songs about their lives. Miss Mercy was perfect for this. She had a strong, unique, almost theatrical way of speaking that cut through the noise. She became one of the group's most recognizable voices. The group was almost set. They had the concept, the members, and a world-famous producer. They just needed one last member to complete the lineup. 7. Cynthia Cale Binion. The final member to join the GTOs was Cynthia Cale Binion, who took the stage name Miss Cinderella. She too came from the groupie world and used her industry relationships to secure her spot in the band. She was the last piece of the puzzle. With her on board, the GTOs were complete, a 7-woman art rock collective, all of whom had gotten their start through through their social and romantic connections. With Frank Zappa producing, the GTOs released their one and only album in 1969 called Permanent Damage. It's one of the strangest albums in rock history. And here's the wow factor. The guest list on that album was insane. It featured spots from huge rock stars like Rod Stewart and guitarist Jeff Beck. This was proof of their connections. The entire project was a perfect example of using those connections to get ahead. The GTOs were perhaps the only band in history formed entirely by women who were famous for their relationships with other stars. The GTOs were a wild experiment, but they weren't the only ones who turned their backstage access into a career. Our next star also dated some of the biggest names in rock and ended up with her own band. 8. Bebe Buell. Bebe Buell was another legendary figure. She was a famous model and a fixture in the rock scene, but she was just as famous for her high-profile romances. We're talking about a list of rock gods: Todd Rundgren, Steven Tyler of Aerosmith, Mick Jagger, and Iggy Pop, just to name a few. She was a total insider. She was even a Playboy model, which in the 70s gave her another level of celebrity and access. But what many overlooked is that she wasn't just a pretty face in a photo. She had her own rock and roll ambitions. She wanted to be the one holding the microphone. So she used those powerful connections to launch her own music career. She formed her own band, Bebe Buell and the B-Sides, and released music in the 1980s. People might have come to her shows because they were curious about the woman who had dated so many legends. But she kept them there with her own energy. And here's a wow factor. For years, her relationship with Steven Tyler was a secret. Her daughter, the actress Liv Tyler, grew up believing her father was Todd Rundgren. The truth eventually came out, keeping Bebe in the headlines and solidifying her status as a central figure in rock mythology. 9. Cherry Vanilla. Working for a star is one way to get in. Cherry Vanilla's story is a great example. She started out in the scene, getting close to musicians, but she got a serious break when she was hired to work for David Bowie. And she wasn't just getting him coffee, she became his publicist. And here's the kicker. This was during the Ziggy Stardust era. This was the absolute peak of Bowie's fame, when he was the most talked about, controversial, and exciting star on the planet. Cherry Vanilla's job was to literally craft the story. She was an insider with an incredible amount of power. She saw how the music machine worked from the inside out. She was also part of the punk rock movement and knew everyone. So what did she do? She decided to use those connections for herself. She parlayed those punk rock ties into her own singing career. She moved to London and released albums like Bad Girl in 1978 and Venus de Vinyl in 1979. Cherry Vanilla proved that being on the payroll of a legend was the best music education you could get and a perfect launching pad for your own career. 10. Patty D'Arbanville. Many people know the name Patty D'Arbanville as an actress. She's been in a ton of movies and TV shows, like New York Undercover. But before she was a familiar face on screen, she was deep in the 1970s rock and roll world. She was famously linked to some of the biggest artists of the day, including Mick Jagger. But her most famous connection was with the singer-songwriter Cat Stevens. And here's the wow factor. She was the direct inspiration for his massive hit song, Lady D'Arbanville. Being the muse for a song that famous, a song that was played on radios all over the world, gives you your own brand of celebrity. You become a part of rock and roll history. She was moving in the highest circles of fame. And she used that fame to try and open another door. She leveraged those high-profile relationships to launch her own music career, releasing singles in the 1980s. While her acting career is what she's remembered for, it's a classic case of using your celebrity in one area to get a shot in another. 11. Lana Del Rey. This is a modern story that's, to put it mildly, shocking. Lana Del Rey is one of the biggest alternative rock artists in the world. Her whole vibe is built on a dark, old-school Hollywood and rock and roll image. And it turns out there might be some truth to it. She has a song. Well, we can't say the full title, but it's called Effed My Way Up to the Top. The title alone had people whispering. In an interview, she was asked about it, and she was surprisingly honest. She admitted to getting intimate with many figures in the music industry when she was starting out. The thing nobody tells you is just how rare that admission is. People just don't talk about this stuff. But here's the kicker, the wow factor that changes everything. She said it didn't even work. She said, "I've been intimate with a lot of guys in the industry, but none of them helped me get a record deal." It's a stunning admission that pulls back the curtain on that casting couch myth. For Lana, it seems, it was just part of the life she was living, and it became material for her art. It perfectly fits her dark, cynical, sad girl persona. 12. Courtney Love. Courtney Love is one of the most controversial figures in rock. As the front woman of the grunge band Hole, she's a powerful rock star in her own right. But for decades, rumors have followed her. People have claimed she used her relationships in the Seattle scene to get ahead. Specifically, whispers pointed to her relationships with other musicians like Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins to boost her own band's visibility. Of course, her marriage to Kurt Cobain, the leader of Nirvana, put her at the absolute center of the music world. She went from an unknown punk rocker to one of the most famous women on earth. But here's the part that has always fueled the fire. The thing nobody tells you is that Hole's most famous and critically acclaimed album, Live Through This, was released in April 1994. The release date was just days after Cobain's tragic passing. This forever linked her greatest career achievement with that massive, dark story. The rumors and accusations have never stopped, creating a confusing legacy. Was her success built on her own raw talent or on her connections? It's a question that still divides fans. 13. Melissa Etheridge. It's hard to believe now, but when Melissa Etheridge was just starting out in the 80s, there was industry gossip. People whispered about her, a young, unknown rocker, and how she was getting her foot in the door. There were rumors that she was leveraging personal connections to get ahead. It was the kind of cheap talk that often follows a talented woman in a male-dominated industry. But here's the thing about true talent. It speaks for itself. Melissa Etheridge quickly silenced all of it, and the wow factor is how she did it. She was playing gigs at a small club in Long Beach, California, called the Blue Parrot. The head of Island Records, Chris Blackwell, heard about her. He went to the club, watched her perform, and signed her on the spot. It wasn't a connection. It was a raw, undeniable performance. She came out as lesbian and proved that her career was built on one thing and one thing only, her unbelievable raw talent. She has a powerhouse voice that can shake a stadium and incredible guitar skills. She's a good example of how talent beats gossip every single time. 14. Phoebe Bridgers. This is a serious and, frankly, disturbing story from the modern music world. Phoebe Bridgers is a huge indie rock star now, praised for her amazing songwriting. But when she was just starting her career, she got involved with an older, more established musician named Ryan Adams. She was a young artist, just 20 years old, and he was a big name. She and other women later came forward with her story. And the wow factor is that this wasn't just a blog post. This was part of a massive, detailed investigation by the New York Times. She said that he dangled major career opportunities in front of her. He offered to produce her music, help her career, and get her in front of the right people. But she said it was all tied to their personal, intimate relationship. The entire thing turned manipulative and controlling, and he never delivered on those big career promises. It's a dark look at the power dynamics that can exist in the music business. What many overlooked at the time was that Phoebe wasn't the only one. Our next artist tells an almost identical story about the exact same producer. 15. Megan Butterworth. Some stories in the music industry are dark, not because they happened in the hazy, lawless past, but because they happened yesterday. They serve as a brutal reminder that for all the progress we've made, the ugly side of fame and power is always lurking. This brings us to Megan Butterworth. She was a talented folk rock musician, full of dreams, trying to make her voice heard in an incredibly crowded industry. And just like so many others, she looked up to the established stars, the ones who had made it. One of those stars was Ryan Adams. Like Phoebe Bridgers, who told her own story of manipulation, Megan Butterworth entered into a relationship with Adams. She was young, in her 20s, full of potential and ambition. He was a critical darling, a prolific songwriter, a gatekeeper who held the keys to the kingdom she so desperately wanted to enter. Her story, which became a crucial piece of that bombshell 2019 New York Times report, was devastating and shockingly similar to the others. She alleged that he dangled the ultimate carrot in front of her, his help. He made big, sweeping promises to collaborate on music, to co-write, to advance her career. He told her he would record her, produce her music, and help make her a star. But here's the sinister part. Those promises were never separate from their personal, romantic relationship. They were all tangled up. The professional opportunity, her life's dream, was allegedly held hostage by the personal demands. The message, she said, was clear. If you want my help, you have to give me you. The real wow factor here isn't just one person's story of a powerful man behaving badly. It's the pattern. This wasn't a he said, she said about a single bad breakup. This was multiple women, all independent of each other, all telling a terrifyingly consistent story. It was a story of a powerful man allegedly using his position, his fame, and his influence to control, manipulate, and take advantage of young, aspiring artists who were just looking for their big break. This is the casting couch story, pulled from the shadows of old Hollywood and dropped directly into the modern indie music scene. It's a chilling reminder that this kind of exploitation is often hiding in plain sight. This dark side of the industry is awful. But as we look back, we find that some figures became famous not for their music, or even for being exploited for their music, but just for being part of the scene. And in the 1970s, the queen of that scene was still in high school. 16. Sable Starr. Let's travel back to the 1970s. The place is Los Angeles, specifically the Sunset Strip. This was the absolute epicenter of rock and roll excess, a neon-drenched playground for the new gods of music. And in this world, there were legends. But not all of them were on stage. Her real name was Sable Shields, but the entire world would come to know her as Sable Starr. Sable was an absolute icon in the 1970s Los Angeles rock scene. She was a fixture at the Whiskey A Go-Go, the Rainbow Bar and Grill, and every backstage party that mattered. But she wasn't in a band. She didn't play an instrument, and she didn't sing. She was, to put it mildly, a baby groupie. She became a legend for her relationships with some of the biggest rock gods on the planet. We're talking about a list that includes Iggy Pop, David Bowie, Mick Jagger, and Rod Stewart. She was the it girl of the groupie world, the one every band wanted to know. But here is the truly wild part, the part that is hard to wrap your head around today. She was doing all of this while she was still a teenager. She was a high school student. And here's the real wow factor. Her fame wasn't just some underground word-of-mouth rumor. The media made her a star. In 1973, a now infamous article in Star magazine, a mainstream publication, officially crowned her the queen of the groupie scene. She was 16 years old. Suddenly, her fame exploded. She was so famous just for being a fan and for who she was with that she became a music celebrity in her own right. She wasn't just a side note, she was the story. She influenced the bands, the fashion, and the entire culture of the scene, all before she was old enough to vote. Her story is a perfect snapshot of a time when the lines were not just blurred, they were non-existent. The era's biggest stars and the media that covered them openly celebrated a teenager for her access to rock's most powerful men. As shocking as that is, her story is almost tame compared to that of her friend and rival. The next story is one of the most infamous and deeply unsettling in all of rock and roll history. 17. Lori Mattix. This is a story that still sends chills down the spine of anyone who knows the dark history of rock. It's a story that, to put it mildly, is very, very disturbing and shows just how completely out of control that 1970s scene really was. Lori Mattix, sometimes spelled Mattix, was part of that exact same 1970s Los Angeles scene as Sable Starr. They were friends and sometimes rivals in the competitive world of baby groupies. And just like Sable, Lori became known for her shocking and controversial relationships. But she wasn't just linked to stars, she was linked to one of the biggest rock gods on the planet. Her name is forever tied to Jimmy Page, the legendary guitarist for Led Zeppelin. Here is the kicker. Here is the part that is hard to even believe, the part that makes your stomach turn. Lori Mattix was reportedly only 14 years old when her relationship with the rock star began. He was 28. Let that sink in for a moment. He was a 28-year-old man, the creative force behind the biggest, most powerful, and most mythologized band in the world. And she was a child, a freshman in high school. And this wasn't some dark, hidden secret. That's the most insane part of all. She was photographed with him. She was written about in rock magazines like Cream and Rolling Stone, almost like a celebrity girlfriend or a quirky accessory. She was also linked to David Bowie. The industry knew, the press knew, the other bands knew, and absolutely no one stopped it. It was accepted and in some corners even celebrated as part of the intimate encounters, substances, and rock and roll lifestyle. She became infamous. She was a music celebrity, not for singing a note or playing an instrument, but for the company she kept at such an incredibly and inappropriately young age. It's a story that reveals the true moral vacuum that existed at the heart of the rock and roll dream. These women became celebrities just for their connections. But our next fan also used her relationships with stars like Eric Clapton, not as a teenager, but as a savvy adult trying to launch her own career. 18. Kathryn James. Not every famous fan from the 70s was a baby groupie. Some were smart, ambitious women who saw the scene for what it was, a network. Kathryn James was one of those women. She was another famous fan who was deep inside the 1970s rock scene, an insider who moved comfortably among the giants. She wasn't a star-struck kid. She was a peer. She was well known for her personal, high-profile relationships with major stars, most notably the rock and blues legend Eric Clapton. But her connections didn't stop there. She was also linked to other icons like Mick Jagger. She wasn't just at the party, she was part of the party. She was an insider, and she saw exactly how the system worked, who pulled the strings, and how fame was manufactured. And unlike many others, she tried to parlay those A-list connections into a career of her own. She was ambitious. She pursued both music and modeling, using her famous name and her even more famous romances to get her foot in the door. She used her proximity to power as a ladder, trying to climb into the spotlight herself. But the thing nobody tells you is that for many of these women, the spotlight they were chasing never fully materialized. The industry would let them in the door, but rarely would it let them onto the main stage. But that's not where her story ends. For many of these women, the real career, The real payday came decades later. Just like Pamela Des Barres, the author of I'm with the Band, Catherine James understood that her most valuable asset wasn't her music or her modeling portfolio. It was her story. She turned her life into a product. She wrote a tell-all memoir called Derailed: My Life in the Fast Lane. It was a classic of the genre, detailing her wild life in the rock scene, the affairs, the excess, the good and the bad. It shows once again that in the world of celebrity, your connections and the stories you can tell about them can often become a far more successful career than the one you originally set out to have. Catherine James cashed in by telling her story. But our next fan was even smarter. She didn't wait decades to write a book. She turned her connections into a real behind-the-scenes job that lasted a lifetime. 19. D.D. Keel. D.D. Keel was a fixture in the Hollywood rock world. She wasn't just there for 1 or 2 glorious, hedonistic years. She was a lifer. She was a longtime fan who was known for her intimate connections to many bands, not just in one era, but over a long, long period. She was part of the very fabric of the Sunset Strip. She saw bands come and go. She saw the 70s rock gods give way to 80s hair metal, which in turn was washed away by 90s grunge. And she was there for all of it. But the thing nobody tells you is that she didn't just fade away when the party ended, and she didn't write a tell-all book. She was smart. She was a networker. She turned those relationships, that trust, and her priceless insider status into a real paying career. D.D. Keel parlayed her connections into various crucial industry roles, working behind the scenes in the music business. She didn't chase the spotlight. She learned how to operate it. What many overlooked is that she became what the industry calls a fixer. This is one of the most important and least understood roles in the entire entertainment world. A fixer is someone who knows everyone and can make things happen. Need a last-minute roadie for a world tour? Need an introduction to a label executive who actually matters? Need to get your demo tape into the hands of a specific rock star? Dee was the person to call. She was the one who held the real-life address book that was more valuable than any record contract. She stayed involved for decades, long after the bands she first knew had broken up or faded into obscurity. She proved that connections, if you're smart enough to maintain them with professionalism and discretion, can last a lifetime. Unlike Catherine James, her power came from not telling the stories. She was the vault, and that made her indispensable. Did you know that more than 100 rock legends have died with secret love letters still hidden in drawers, hotel safes, and stage cases, never meant for the world to see? From pop megastars who loved in silence to metal gods who left no trace but a final note. Here are 20 rock and roll legends who kept a secret lover until the day they died. 1. Michael Jackson and Whitney Houston. Michael Jackson, the most famous pop singer in the world, had something he never told his fans. It wasn't about dancing or singing. It was about love. A deep, private love. In the early 1990s, when everything in his career was huge and bright, he quietly shared something special with another star, Whitney Houston. She was also at the top. Her voice could fill stadiums, but her heart found peace with Michael. They didn't show this to the world. They stayed hidden. They spent quiet time at Neverland Ranch, away from crowds, away from the cameras. People close to them later said they were serious. They talked about marriage. They wanted a quiet life together, away from fame. This wasn't just a rumor, it was a real connection. It stayed secret while they were alive. Only after both of them were gone did the truth begin to rise. Friends and people who worked with them spoke about what they had seen. This wasn't a quick love. This wasn't just a moment. It was deep, strong, but it had to stay in the dark. Maybe they were scared the world wouldn't accept it. Maybe they wanted to protect it. The world only saw their stage life, their fame, their pain. 2. Elvis Presley and Joyce Bova. When people talk about Elvis Presley, they always mention Priscilla. But that's not the whole truth. There was someone else who loved him deeply. Her name was Joyce Bova. She didn't sing, she didn't act. She worked in politics, far from flashing lights. But for years, she and Elvis shared something secret. Their time together started while he was still with Priscilla. They kept it quiet. It wasn't about show, it was about peace. Joyce later said they wanted to have a child. They dreamed about a quiet home, far from stress, but it didn't happen. Their love stayed silent, hidden. After Elvis was gone in 1977, she finally told her story. By then, it was too late for him to explain. Too late for both sides. But her words made people think. Why didn't he share this love with the world? Maybe he was tired. Maybe he needed someone who saw the real him. Behind the gold suits and screaming fans, Elvis was just a man looking for calm. Joyce gave him that. Their love wasn't fake. It was just private. And that makes it even more real. 3. Prince and Susanna Melvoin. Prince was loud on stage, colors, sound, and mystery. But when it came to his heart, he closed the door. In the 1980s, he fell in love with Susanna Melvoin. She was more than a singer. She was part of his soul. They were close, even engaged, but they didn't tell the world. They kept their love in the shadows. Prince wrote songs with her in mind. Some were about joy, others about heartbreak. She was in the music, hidden in every beat. Even after they parted ways, she stayed close. He trusted her. When Prince passed in 2016, people looked back. They saw the signs. The truth had always been there, in lyrics, in silence, in his eyes. Their story wasn't on magazine covers, but it was strong. It didn't need noise. Maybe Prince wanted to protect what they had. Maybe he feared the world would break it. Their love wasn't for the cameras. It was real in a world where so much is fake. Their story tells us love can be quiet, yet powerful. 4. Freddie Mercury and the Munich Hairdresser. Freddie Mercury sang like a storm and lived like a fire. But behind the stage, he had a heart that wanted peace. In the early 1980s, he stayed in Germany. That's where he met someone who made him feel safe. A hairdresser from Munich. This person wasn't famous, but Freddie kept them close. They spent time together while he worked in the studio. They didn't walk red carpets. They didn't take photos. They just lived small, quiet moments. People who worked with him noticed the change. Freddie laughed more. He smiled. He looked free. This love came before the one the world later knew, but that doesn't make it less important. He didn't write songs about it. He didn't talk about it in interviews. Maybe he didn't want the media to ruin it. Maybe he wanted to protect someone who gave him peace. Only after he passed did others speak. They remembered the smiles, the care, the late-night talks. It was real. This story is not about stage lights. It's not about fame. It's about a person who helped Freddie feel like himself. And that matters. These hidden stories all show the same thing. Behind the awards, money, and huge shows were people trying to hold on to something real, but not the kind that goes on TV. The kind that lives in quiet places. The kind that stays even when no one is watching. 5. David Bowie and Dana Gillespie. David Bowie was a star with a wild look and a mind full of songs. But behind the bright lights, there was someone always nearby, Dana Gillespie. Most people didn't know how close they were. She wasn't just a singer he helped. She wasn't just someone he wrote music for. She was someone he stayed with, again and again, when no one was looking. They didn't take pictures together in public. They didn't talk about what they were doing. But people who were around back then knew. They saw it. They felt it. Bowie and Dana would leave town together and disappear for weeks. No press, no cameras, just the two of them. In the 1970s, Bowie was becoming a big name. He had fans everywhere. But during all that, Dana was with him, in the background, helping, waiting, loving. Some of their friends said later that they were more than close. They were lovers. It wasn't for show. It wasn't to make headlines. They had a real thing, a private thing. She didn't ask for fame from it. She didn't use his name to rise. She was just always there. And for years, they kept it hidden from the world. 6. John Lennon and May Pang. May Pang started as just someone who worked for John Lennon. She answered phones. She ran errands. She wasn't famous. But then something changed. John and Yoko Ono were having problems. They needed space. And during that time, John turned to May. Not in front of the public, not in the newspapers, but at home, quietly. Suddenly, May wasn't just the assistant. She was the person who shared his house, his thoughts, his life. For 18 months, they lived together. They laughed, traveled, made memories. And John made a lot of music. He once said it was one of the best times in his life for writing songs. Still, they kept it quiet. Yoko may have known. She may have even agreed to it behind closed doors. But the public didn't. May didn't tell people. She didn't write about it right away. She held on to the story until long after John was gone. There were no magazine stories, no red carpet pictures. It was all in the shadows. But it was real as any other part of his life. Jimi Hendrix and Lithophane Pridgon. Before Jimi Hendrix was a name the world knew, before the noise, the lights, the fans screaming his name, there was Faye. Her full name was Lithophane Pridgon, but everyone called her Faye. She was different. She wasn't there for the fame. She was there before the fame, when Hendrix was poor, when he played tiny shows, when he didn't know where he'd sleep next. Faye was there. She gave him a place to stay. She gave him food. She believed in him when most people didn't. While other women came and went once Hendrix became famous, Faye stayed quiet. She didn't talk to the press. She didn't even ask for anything. And yet, she was always in his heart. She saw the part of him that wasn't a star. She saw the man who was still trying to make it. After Hendrix was gone, Faye finally spoke. She said their bond was deep. It was real. She said she had to stay quiet because the world wouldn't understand. While the world looked at Hendrix as a wild man, Faye remembered the one who sat with her on the floor, playing guitar, hoping for a break. Their time together was hidden, but it lasted longer than anyone thought. She stayed out of the spotlight because she never wanted anything but him. 8. Amy Winehouse and Pete Doherty. Amy Winehouse lived a life that everyone watched. The world knew her name. They knew her songs. They knew her troubles. Paparazzi followed her down the street. Her relationships were always in the news. But one relationship stayed in the dark. Pete Doherty. He had his own hard path. He sang in a band, and he got in trouble often. His name was often linked with bad choices and wrong turns. But with Amy, there was something else, something quiet, something hidden. While the world was busy talking about Amy and her other partners, she and Pete were sharing something real. They didn't go to big parties together. They didn't pose for photos. They just spent time with each other when the cameras weren't around. After Amy passed away, Pete finally spoke. He said she was the most important woman in his life. That didn't come from nowhere. That came from something deep, but they kept it quiet. Maybe they knew people would never understand. Maybe it was just too personal. They were both dealing with pain, both trying to survive. They leaned on each other when no one else could see. Pete didn't try to make it into a show. He just said what he felt. And their story, one of love and hurt and silence, stayed in the shadows until it was too late to ask questions. 9. Roy Orbison and the Unnamed Lover. Roy Orbison sang songs that made people cry. His music was full of loss and pain. After his wife Claudette passed away in a crash, the world thought Roy was all alone. But that was not the truth. Behind the sadness, something was hidden. Roy had a woman, a secret woman. No one knew her name. No one saw her at shows. She didn't go on red carpets. She stayed in the shadows. Yet she was always there, always close. For years, Roy kept her out of the spotlight. Not even his bandmates knew. He wrote letters to her. He wrote about her in his journals. They talked about their dreams, their hopes, and their feelings. After Roy was gone in 1988, these letters were found. People were shocked. The love was deep. The love was strong. It had lasted for many years. She had been with him quietly. Through the grief, through the tours, through the lonely hotel nights, she stayed. And no one knew. Fans never saw her. Reporters never asked about her. Even close friends were clueless. Roy kept her locked away in his heart. This woman, whose name we still do not know, was his peace in a storm. While others saw a man broken by sorrow, he was holding on to something soft and true, and he never told a soul. 10. Chuck Berry and the French Woman. Chuck Berry rocked the world. His music had fire. His steps were fast. He moved crowds. But his final years were slower, quieter. And during that quiet, he found her. A young woman from France. No one knew her face. No one knew her name. She was never on stage. She was never on the news. But she was there. Chuck met her during a trip to Europe. Something clicked. She came to see him. She traveled across the ocean to visit him in Missouri. Many times, she stayed with him when he was old. She sat beside him when the world stopped calling. No cameras, no stories. She was like a ghost, always near, but never seen. People in his small circle noticed. They said Chuck smiled more when she was near. He sat back more. He didn't need to prove anything. She made him feel safe, calm. She brought joy, but he never talked about her. He never shared her with the world. She stayed in the background, quiet and loyal. 11. Mark Bolan and Gloria Jones. Mark Bolan lit up the stage with glitter and wild hair. His songs were loud. His clothes were bright. He was married. People thought they knew his story. But behind the lights, something else was happening. Something quiet. Something real. He met Gloria Jones, a singer with her own path. They started something, but it wasn't for the world to see. They hid it. Even after they had a child together, they kept it low. They lived together, but not in the spotlight. No magazines followed them. No big stories were written. It was real, but it was private. Years passed. Fans didn't know. Reporters didn't ask. It was a home full of music, but it stayed off the radar. Then came the crash. In 1977, Mark was gone. Gloria was with him. She had been driving. That's when the truth came out. People saw their bond. People saw their life. It wasn't fake. It wasn't short. They had built a life together, one that was never shown on stage. Gloria stayed strong after the accident. She kept their child safe. She carried the story alone. The world had missed it all. The true love of Mark Bolan's life wasn't the one people expected. She was the one who had been there all along. 12. George Harrison and Kathy Etchingham. George Harrison was known as the quiet one in the Beatles. He was married to Pattie Boyd. They were the couple people talked about. Photos, headlines, magazine covers. But before Pattie, there was Kathy Etchingham, and she never went away. Kathy knew George before the fame, before the screaming fans, before the lights. They met when he was just starting out. Their bond was strong. They laughed. They shared time. She knew the real him, not the one on stage. Even after he married Pattie, George kept in touch with Kathy. Their story didn't end. Kathy stayed far from fame. She didn't want to be known. She didn't want interviews. While George flew around the world, Kathy stayed in the background, but their bond stayed steady. She was part of his world, even if no one saw it. Years later, when the noise faded, she spoke, just a little, just enough to let people know. George had loved her for years. Even while fans followed other stories, Kathy was there, hidden, quiet, real. She didn't try to take credit. She didn't rewrite history. She just told her truth. She had been part of his life, from the start, through the fame, through the change. She stayed in the background, but the bond never left. 13. Johnny Cash and Billie Jean Horton. Johnny Cash and June Carter looked like a dream team. Everyone knew their love story. They sang together, laughed together, and stayed married until the end. But there was someone else in Johnny's heart, someone most people never heard about. Her name was Billie Jean Horton. She was the widow of Hank Williams, another music legend. Before June, before the bright lights and cameras, Billie Jean had a deep hold on Johnny. Their secret started early and never fully ended. Billie Jean wasn't just another name in the past. She meant something big to Johnny. When he was still young in the music world, she stood by him. She helped shape him. She was close when he was becoming the man everyone would know. Their connection was private, but strong. While the world saw June as the love of his life, Billie Jean never really left the picture. Their story was kept quiet, behind closed doors, far from flashing lights. Even as Johnny grew older and more famous, Billie Jean stayed in the background. They never spoke about it. No interviews, no books, no photos. But people close to them said she never stopped being a part of his life. She stayed close, quietly watching as he built a life with someone else. It was a second love story, hidden in plain sight. She wasn't chasing fame. She just cared. And Johnny never turned away from that connection. It stayed with him for life. 14. Tom Petty and the Hidden Companion. Tom Petty had a strong voice, a big name, and a full life on paper. But there was a part of his world no one really saw. Not even fans who followed every album or every concert. In his later years, when he was tired and not feeling well, there was someone always around, a woman. She stayed out of the spotlight. No one knew her name. She was never shown in magazines. No red carpet, no public kisses. But she was always there. This woman wasn't part of the music business. She didn't want attention. She didn't even want to be known. What mattered was her closeness to Tom. People who spent time with him said she was kind, patient, and calm. She helped him when things got tough. When his body was in pain and his mind was full of worry, she gave him comfort. She didn't need to be seen. She didn't ask for anything. She just stayed. During his final days, she was right there, always. Taking care of him, making sure he wasn't alone. She never left. Some said her quiet love meant more than anyone could understand. After he passed, stories started to come out. Friends mentioned the woman in the background. Not a fan, not a helper. A real part of his life. And yet the world never knew her name. Just a hidden person who held a broken star together in his last hours. 15. Gregg Allman and the European Partner. Gregg Allman was known for his wild days and loud nights. He had many girlfriends. Many people thought they knew everything about him. He was in the news a lot, on stage, off stage, always seen. But later in life, things changed. He slowed down. And a quiet woman from Europe entered the picture. She didn't speak to the press. She didn't go to parties. She kept herself away from the noise. But she stayed close to Gregg when he needed someone the most. Their time together was private. No one really knew how long they were a couple, but she was there. She was part of his home life. She wasn't looking for attention. She wasn't part of the show. When he got sick, when the days got harder, she became the one he trusted. She made sure he ate, rested, and felt peace. Others noticed her quiet strength. She brought calm to a man who once lived like a storm. After he passed away in 2017, people started asking questions. Who was this woman? Why had no one seen her before? Family members quietly said she had been part of his life for years. They said she gave him more than comfort. She gave him the feeling that everything would be okay. Greg had been through so much: fame, mistakes, loss. But near the end, he found someone who made all that hurt feel smaller, a partner the world never saw. 16. Lane Staley and Demry Parrott. Lane Staley wasn't just the haunting voice behind Alice in Chains. He was the pain in the music. His lyrics bled sorrow, his voice cracked with truth, and his eyes often looked somewhere far away. But if there was one place that ever truly felt like home for Lane, it was in the presence of Demry Parrott. Demry wasn't just his girlfriend. She was his muse, his soulmate, and the only person who seemed to understand the quiet agony behind his fame. While the world saw Lane as a tortured genius wrapped in flannel and darkness, Demry saw the gentle artist who still believed in love, who laughed at silly things, and who clung to beauty even in the midst of chaos. Together, they weren't rock stars or addicts. They were just two broken souls trying to keep each other warm in a world that often felt too cold. Their relationship was raw, unpredictable, and deeply passionate. They shared everything, from poetic nights filled with laughter and records to long stretches of silence weighed down by the heavy fog of substance abuse. They tried to heal each other, but addiction isn't easily beaten, especially when it becomes part of your love story. Over time, Demry's health began to fail. Years of drug use had taken a toll. She passed away in 1996 from complications related to her addiction, and for Lane, that moment shattered whatever was left of him. After Demry died, Lane didn't just grieve, he disappeared. He retreated into the shadows of his Seattle apartment, refusing to see friends, refusing to make music, refusing to live. Those close to him said it was like watching a light slowly fade. Her photographs stayed on his walls. Her letters remained untouched. Her clothes, her perfume, little pieces of her soul. He kept them all like relics of a sacred past. He never replaced her. He never tried. Over the next few years, Lane's voice grew quiet. He rarely left his home. The man who once screamed through speakers now barely whispered through phone calls. On April 5, 2002, Lane Staley was found dead in his apartment. He had been gone for days. The official cause was a speedball overdose, but those who knew him would tell you the real cause was heartbreak. Demry had gone first, and Lane, piece by piece, followed her into the dark. 17. Cliff Burton and the Secret Fiancé. Cliff Burton was more than Metallica's bassist. He was the soul of the band in its early years, a wild-haired wizard who treated the bass like a weapon of thunder. He played with the kind of passion that made people stop and stare, even if they didn't know a single thing about music. But off stage, Cliff was calm, introspective, and surprisingly gentle. What many fans didn't know, what almost no one outside his inner circle knew, was that Cliff was in love, deeply, secretly, and genuinely. Somewhere in the background of his wild touring life was a woman who had captured his heart. She wasn't famous. She wasn't chasing the spotlight. In fact, she stayed far away from the noise and the chaos of the music industry. She was private, quiet, and deeply supportive. Cliff loved that about her. She was his escape from the madness, his anchor. They had talked about a future, maybe a cabin up north, maybe a place by the lake, something away from tour buses and recording studios. He even picked out a ring, something simple but meaningful, something that said, "You're it for me." Cliff told friends that once the tour was over, once life slowed down, he was going to propose. It was going to be a new chapter. But that chapter never came. On the morning of September 27, 1986, tragedy struck. Metallica's tour bus lost control on a cold Swedish road. Cliff was thrown through the window as the bus flipped. The young bassist, just 24 years old, died instantly. The world mourned. Metallica was shattered. But there was someone else, someone who cried alone, away from the cameras, away from the headlines. His secret fiancée vanished from the public eye. She never gave interviews. She never showed up at concerts. She never told her side of the story. Her grief was quiet, sacred. Some say she returned to her hometown. Others believe she remained a silent presence in the background, close to the band in spirit, if not in sight. But Cliff's friends confirmed she was real. They saw her, they knew her, and they knew how much Cliff had loved her. It's one of those tragic love stories that never gets a final act. No wedding, no vows, just memories left behind in a hotel room, a ring that was never given, and a love that the world never got to see. 18, Ronnie Van Zant and the Mississippi Woman. Ronnie Van Zant stood on stage like he owned it. He sang for Lynyrd Skynyrd and moved like he had fire in his bones. But when the lights turned off, he wasn't just the tough leader everyone saw. Behind closed doors, Ronnie had someone else, a woman. She lived in Mississippi. She was not his wife, but she was real, and she stayed in his life until the end. During tours, he would visit her. Not often, but enough. The crew knew. Some friends talked. She never came to shows. She never talked to magazines. She stayed out of sight. Ronnie liked it that way. Maybe he didn't want to explain. Maybe he couldn't. It wasn't easy. He had a wife, a family, and fans watching every step. But he kept going back to her. People noticed when he left suddenly or made last-minute stops. Every time it was Mississippi. Every time it was her. In 1977, the plane went down. Ronnie was eliminated with others on board. After that, she vanished. No interviews, no books, not even a name. But the people close to him remembered. They remembered the way he talked about her when he thought no one was listening. They remembered the softer side he tried to hide. She gave him peace. In a life full of loud music, wild nights, and fast living, she was the quiet in his storm. She never asked for anything. And when he was gone, she didn't ask for fame. She kept what they had to herself. Maybe that's how Ronnie would have wanted it. 19. Warren Zevon and the Silent Muse. Warren Zevon wrote songs that were sharp, like knives. He had a voice that made people stop and listen. But what they didn't know was that behind the music, behind the tough words, there was someone else. A woman. She was not famous. She was not part of the music world. But she was close to Warren's heart. She never showed her face in public. She never gave a story. But she was there. Warren never said her name. But in his last songs, people could feel her. He began writing differently. Less about wild things, more about love, loss, and holding on to something you can't keep. Friends said he would write in small notebooks about her. He never showed the pages, but they found them later. The words told of someone he missed, someone who made him better. She didn't leave marks in the news, but she left marks in his music. And in the end, that was all he had left. Some say she came back when he got sick. Quiet visits. No one knew. Others think she stayed far away, but stayed in his thoughts. Either way, she became his muse. A silent one. The kind you don't see, but feel in every word. Warren didn't shout her name. He let her live in the lines of his final songs. And now, every time those songs play, she's there. 20. Rory Gallagher and the Anonymous Irish Woman. Rory Gallagher was one of the best blues guitar players ever. But he didn't live like a rock star. He didn't care about fame. He played because he loved it. He didn't like interviews. He didn't talk much about his private life, and because of that, most people didn't know he had someone special. A woman. She lived in Ireland. She was his, and no one knew. Friends said they were close for years. She didn't go to concerts. She didn't travel with the band. She didn't want to be seen. But Rory loved her. He would visit her in quiet places. No bodyguards, no pictures. Just the two of them. She stayed out of the spotlight, and Rory respected that. He liked that their time was just for them. No cameras, no fans, just quiet love. When Rory got sick, she didn't appear, not even when he passed in 1995. But after, people close to him began to talk. They said she was real. They said she had been his calm place. In a life filled with noise, she was the silence he needed, and she never wanted the world to know. She had him, and that was enough. No one wrote her name, no one took her photo, but she was there, behind the songs, behind the long tours, behind the man who gave everything to music. What if I told you that over 10,000 affairs and broken promises lurk behind the biggest names in rock and roll, turning backstage into a battlefield of lies and betrayal? From Robert Plant and his openly reckless affairs to Jimmy Page and the hidden relationships he kept from the world. Here are 25 biggest cheaters in rock and roll history. One of the biggest rock and roll stars in history, Elvis Presley was loved by millions, but behind his fame, he had a troubled life. He was married to Priscilla Presley, but their marriage was not as happy as it seemed. He was often unfaithful, and Priscilla had to live with his constant betrayal. Priscilla met Elvis when she was only 14 years old. He influenced her life in many ways and controlled her choices. When they got married in the late 1960s, she hoped their love would last. But Elvis could not stay loyal. He was surrounded by fame and temptation, and he had affairs with many women, including Hollywood actresses and beauty queens. His close friends, known as the Memphis Mafia, helped keep his secrets. One of his most well-known affairs was with Anne Margaret, his co-star in the movie Viva Las Vegas. Their connection was strong, and Priscilla knew about it. He also had relationships with Sybil Shepherd, Linda Thompson, and many others. While he lived a life of fame and excitement, Priscilla felt trapped and alone. Eventually, Priscilla decided to leave him. When she had her own relationship outside of their marriage, Elvis was furious. He could not accept betrayal, even though he had been unfaithful for years. Their marriage fell apart in the early 1970s, and his personal struggles only got worse. His reckless choices did not just break his family, they also played a part in his decline. 2. John Lennon. A famous musician and a symbol of peace, John Lennon had a complicated personal life. Before Yoko Ono became his partner, he was married to Cynthia Powell. She was with him before he became a star, but their relationship suffered as his fame grew. Even though Cynthia hoped he would change, Lennon was not faithful to her. When Beatlemania took over the world, women wanted to be with him, and he often gave in to temptation. Cynthia tried to ignore the truth, but it became impossible to hide. The biggest betrayal happened when she came home from a trip and found Yoko Ono in their house, wearing Cynthia's robe. Lennon did not apologize or try to fix things. He simply moved on. Even after he was with Yoko, Lennon continued to have affairs. Some people thought they were the perfect couple, but those who knew them saw the problems. At one point, Yoko even encouraged him to have a relationship with May Pang, his assistant, hoping it would help their marriage. Lennon spoke about love and peace, but he struggled to be faithful in his own life. He wrote beautiful songs and inspired many people, but his personal relationships were filled with heartbreak and mistakes. 3. Mick Jagger. The famous singer of the rock band the Rolling Stones, Mick Jagger was known for living life wildly. Many women liked him, and he dated whoever he wanted. From the very start, Mick had many girlfriends, and he never changed. Love, marriage, and even having kids did not stop him from dating many people. His first serious girlfriend was Marianne Faithfull. She loved Mick deeply, but he was not loyal. He even dated her best friend, Anita Pallenberg. Later, he married Bianca Jagger in the 1970s, But staying loyal to one person was not something Mick could do. Bianca said their marriage ended before it even really started. Mick's longest relationship was with Jerry Hall. People thought this would be different, but he still cheated and lied. Jerry stayed with him for a long time, even though he hurt her many times. But when Mick had a child with another woman, Luciana Gimenez, Jerry decided it was too much, finally left him. Even then, Mick moved on quickly. As he got older, Mick still dated many women. He dated famous models and rich women. His charm made people forgive him no matter what he did. Unlike other famous people who tried to hide their cheating, Mick was open and honest about his life. He never pretended to be someone different. 4. David Bowie. A famous singer who was always changing his look and style, David Bowie loved making new personalities, both in music and real life. He did not follow anyone else's rules. His marriage to Angie Bowie was unusual from the start. They lived a life filled with riches and excitement, but they did not follow normal marriage rules. People said they both agreed it was okay to see other people, but even without rules, some wondered if this was still wrong. David dated many famous and beautiful women like actors, models, and other singers. One special girlfriend was Ava Cherry, a singer who stayed with him for many years. She knew she was not the only one. Many people talked about him dating famous women who even dated Mick Jagger. There were even stories about David and Mick having a secret relationship, making people more curious about his life. He did not think commitment meant staying with just one person. David moved from one relationship to another, never staying very long. Even after marrying Iman, his life before was still full of secrets and exciting stories. People knew he was a great artist, but being loyal in love was something he found very hard to do. 5. Keith Richards. Known as the bad boy of rock and roll, Keith Richards was just as guilty of cheating as his bandmate Mick Jagger, though Mick got more attention for it. He loved breaking rules and did not believe in being loyal to one person. He didn't just cheat. He enjoyed the trouble it caused. His most famous relationship was with Anita Pallenberg. They had a strong but difficult love, and everyone knew they were both seeing other people. The biggest scandal was when Anita was said to have cheated on Keith with Mick Jagger, shocking fans everywhere. Even though he was angry, Keith had cheated many times himself. For him, love was never about being loyal. It was about living freely, even if people got hurt. After Anita, Keith kept living wildly. He had many girlfriends who came and went quickly. Each new girl fell for him easily, but he soon moved on. When he married Patty Hansen, some thought he had finally settled down. But could someone who loved freedom and adventure so much really stay with one person? People say Keith never felt sorry for cheating. He thought it was just part of his life. Did he ever truly love anyone, or was he too wild and restless to belong to just one person? 6. Eric Clapton. Known for more than just his music, Eric Clapton didn't just cheat. He did something even worse. He betrayed his close friend, George Harrison, by falling in love with George's wife, Pattie Boyd. Very beautiful and the inspiration for many famous songs, Pattie was married to George until Eric decided he wanted her. He wrote a song called Layla, showing his deep sadness because he couldn't have her. When Pattie rejected him, he got very upset and began using substances to cope with the pain. But his desire did not end there. After finally marrying Pattie, Eric continued cheating on her with other women. The worst betrayal happened when he had a child with another woman while still married to Pattie. Heartbroken, she left him. It's strange because he wrote beautiful songs about true love and loyalty. But in real life, Eric Clapton could not stop cheating and hurting those he claimed to love. 7. Bruce Springsteen. A famous singer known for songs about everyday life and working people, Bruce Springsteen was loved by fans because his songs felt honest and true. But in his own life, things weren't always clear and simple. He married an actress named Julianne Phillips. At first, it seemed like Bruce had everything: fame, money, and a beautiful wife. But soon, things became difficult. He traveled often for concerts, and this made their marriage hard. While touring, Bruce became close with Patti Scialfa, a singer in his band. Patti and Bruce shared a special connection that went beyond music. People around them could easily see their strong feelings for each other. During a tour in the late 1980s, photographers noticed them spending a lot of time together. Then a famous photo appeared showing Bruce and Patti hugging in Rome. This photo proved what many had suspected. Julianne felt hurt by this, and the public was shocked. Fans who believed in his songs about honesty and loyalty felt confused and upset. His marriage to Julianne ended in divorce in 1989, and he began officially dating Patti. Bruce and Patti married in 1991 and stayed together for many years. But some people still wonder if his early actions were right. His music is about learning from mistakes, but in real life, even famous people sometimes make choices that hurt others. 8. Bono. The famous singer from a band called U2, Bono has been married to his wife, Allie Hewson, since 1982. Unlike many rock stars, he always seemed different from other famous musicians because he stayed away from trouble like substances and scandal. However, there have always been stories that he might have had secret relationships with other women. These stories were never proven true, but many people talked about them. People often saw Bono with famous women like actress Penelope Cruz and models Christy Turlington and Helena Christensen. Because they spent time together, some people wondered if these were just friendships or something more. He never talked about these rumors, so no one knows for sure what really happened. The life of a rock star is full of exciting things, like traveling around the world, staying in fancy hotels, and attending late-night parties. These things can make it hard for someone to stay loyal to their partner. Bono never publicly admitted to doing anything wrong, but people still wonder if he was always faithful. Even though he avoided big scandals, the rumors about his life show that it can be hard for famous people to live without questions and doubts. Bono chose not to speak about these stories, keeping his private life mysterious. Both Bruce Springsteen and Bono show us that even very famous people have problems and make choices that aren't perfect. Their stories remind us that everyone, famous or not, can make mistakes and face questions from others about the choices they make. 9. Sting. The singer for a famous band called The Police, Sting was known for being wise and thoughtful. He wrote songs that made people think deeply about love and life, and many saw him as not just a musician, but also a poet. For a long time, people saw his marriage to Trudy Styler as very strong. This seemed unusual because many famous musicians often had broken marriages. But Sting had secrets in his past. Before marrying Trudy Styler, he was married to an actress named Frances Tomalty. Their marriage ended in a very public way when he fell in love with his wife's best friend, Trudy. This hurt Frances deeply and became one of the most famous scandals in rock music. After marrying Trudy, there were still rumors about him being unfaithful. People talked about Sting having relationships outside his marriage. He also became famous for talking openly about personal topics, like unusual ways of experiencing love. This made people wonder if he believed in staying faithful or if he liked to explore outside of marriage. No one has proven he was unfaithful again, but many people still wonder. Sting is charming and talented, and some question whether he used this charm off stage too. Even after many years, he and Trudy are still married. They appear very strong and happy together, but people still ask questions because of his complicated past. 10. Phil Collins. Another famous singer whose music touched millions of hearts, Phil Collins often wrote songs about sadness, love, and loss. Many people believed his songs came from personal pain, but he was not just someone who suffered from love. Sometimes he caused the pain himself. Collins was famous for not being faithful in his relationships. He had several marriages, and many ended badly. His second wife, Jill Tavelman, faced a very public breakup. People said he ended their marriage by sending a fax. He denied this, but many people still believed it. Later, Phil married Orianne Seavey. She became one of his biggest loves, but also his biggest problem. Their marriage followed a familiar pattern. First deep love, then lies and broken trust. His mistakes cost him a lot of money, and caused much sadness. Despite all this, Collins did not lose many fans. His music and honesty in interviews protected his image. People saw him as someone who felt great sadness, not as someone who caused pain. But the truth was clear. He hurt many people he claimed to love. Today, people remember him as both a talented musician and a person who struggled with love and honesty. His story is one of mistakes, broken promises, and lessons learned the hard way. 11. Eddie Van Halen. Famous for playing guitar, Eddie Van Halen was called a legend because he could make music that amazed everyone. But behind the bright lights and cheering fans, his life was not simple. Eddie had problems he hid from the world. Married to a famous actress named Valerie Bertinelli, he and his wife seemed happy to fans. But things were different when no one was watching. Eddie often cheated on Valerie. He made mistakes over and over again, especially when he was on tour. Traveling from city to city, he faced many temptations and often gave in. The world of concerts and tours was filled with bad choices. People there broke rules and did whatever they wanted. Valerie tried hard to ignore Eddie's mistakes because she wanted their love to last. But even strong love can't survive too many hurts. Besides cheating, he also struggled with substances and alcohol. These bad habits made things worse. Eddie's problems slowly ruined their marriage until nothing was left. In the end, divorce was the only choice. Valerie later said she still loved him even after all the pain. It was a sad truth because he had caused her so much hurt. 12. Rod Stewart. Another famous singer known for making mistakes with women, Rod Stewart didn't try to hide it. He was open about his life and didn't mind what people thought. He sang songs that touched people's hearts, but in real life, he often hurt those closest to him. Married to Alana Hamilton, Rod saw his marriage fall apart. He was always looking for excitement and fun, and this hurt their relationship. Later, he fell in love with Rachel Hunter, but again, his love for excitement was stronger than his promises to stay loyal. The special thing about Rod was that he always told the truth. He didn't make up stories or lies to hide his mistakes. He joked about it and accepted who he was. Some people liked his honesty, but others saw it as proof he could never change. Even as he grew older and settled down, people always remembered his past. Rod believed that cheating was just part of his life, something he could not avoid. He lived a life that many people dreamed about, but he also faced the problems that came with it. 13. Ozzy Osbourne. Famous for his wild life as a rock star, Ozzy Osbourne was known for crazy behavior, loud music, and partying. But behind all the fame, he had a secret that shocked everyone. His biggest mistake was cheating on his wife, Sharon Osbourne. In 2016, people were surprised when Sharon found out he had been cheating. Ozzy had a long relationship with a hairstylist named Michelle Pugh, but this was not his only mistake. He had been unfaithful many times before, with at least 6 different women. Fans were very surprised because Sharon had always supported him, even when he had problems with substances and alcohol. Things got worse when Ozzy said he had a compulsive behavior and went into therapy. Many people wondered if he really had an addiction or if he just wanted an excuse. Sharon felt hurt and embarrassed. She openly wondered if she could ever trust him again. Even after the pain, Sharon and Ozzy stayed together. In 2017, they renewed their wedding promises to each other, but things never felt completely right again. His image was now hurt by this betrayal, and people wondered if he could ever recover from it. 14. Gene Simmons. Another famous rock star known for being wild, Gene Simmons was part of the band Kiss, famous for their exciting performances, makeup, and crazy lifestyles. He was known for sticking out his long tongue, breathing fire, and partying non-stop. But Gene had a big problem too. Unlike other rock stars who tried to hide cheating, he was open about it. Gene claimed he had been with over 5,000 women and even kept pictures of every woman he had been with. It wasn't just wild rock behavior. It was an obsession. His longtime partner, Shannon Tweed, knew about his behavior and tried to live with it. She laughed about it publicly at first, but later it started to hurt her. Around 2010, Shannon began to feel very unhappy about his behavior and finally told him how she felt. This moment was important because Gene had to face what he had done. Even though he promised he would stop cheating, Shannon found it hard to believe him. His past was filled with women, lies, and arrogance. In 2011, after many years together, he finally married Shannon. It surprised everyone because nobody thought he could settle down. People wondered if someone like Gene, who had lived such a wild life, could really change. Could he ever truly be faithful after years of cheating and partying? 15. Paul Stanley. The famous singer of Kiss, Paul Stanley, was loved by fans because he seemed nice and romantic, not just a wild rock star. Unlike his bandmate, Gene Simmons, he didn't brag about dating many women. Instead, Paul quietly hid his secrets, but he also hurt people by not telling the truth. During the best years of Kiss, many women liked him. They thought Paul was special and caring, but secretly, he dated several people at the same time. Gene Simmons openly dated many women, but Paul pretended to care deeply, making his lies more hurtful. His girlfriends didn't know about each other, which caused sadness when they found out. 16. Jimmy Page. A famous guitar player known for his amazing music and mysterious image, Jimmy Page fascinated fans. But behind the music, he had many secrets. He didn't just enjoy fame. He planned his secret life carefully. Quietly dating many people, Jimmy was supposed to be committed to just one, but still pursued models, groupies, and famous figures. Unlike other rock stars who openly dated many women, he kept everything secret, hiding his relationships to protect his image. One secret relationship was especially troubling. Jimmy met a girl when she was very young and kept her hidden from everyone. His secrets didn't only hurt his partners, they affected his friends, the band, and the public. Even as he had a family with a well-known model, he continued having secret dates. 17. Robert Plant. Famous for his voice, golden hair, and powerful performances, Robert Plant was adored by fans who thought he was wonderful. On stage, he seemed magical and perfect. But off stage, his life was very different. Married but often acting as if he wasn't, Robert openly dated many women. Unlike Jimmy, who kept secrets, he proudly showed off his girlfriends. Everyone knew about his relationships, even though he had a wife waiting at home. One woman was special to him, not just another date, but someone he took everywhere, even on tours. His wife knew nothing about it, yet even this special woman was not enough. Robert kept dating more women wherever he went. People who loved him learned he could not be faithful. Eventually, his marriage ended, but he didn't change his ways. Even when he became less famous, the stories about his relationships continued. Robert sang about love, but his actions showed something different. His life was filled with broken promises and hurt feelings. 18. Jerry Lee Lewis. Famous for playing rock music, Jerry Lee Lewis was also known for his troubled life. He didn't treat people well, especially the women he married. Getting married 7 times, he never understood loyalty. Instead, he hurt the feelings of his wives by cheating and treating them badly. He didn't truly love or respect them. Instead, he controlled and hurt them emotionally. Some of these relationships even turned dangerous. The worst thing he did was marry a girl who was still a teenager. This shocked everyone because she was too young, and he was much older. His music career fell apart, but he didn't change. Even while married to her, he continued seeing other women. His wives were often scared of his temper because he got angry very easily. 2 of them died in very sad and mysterious ways. People wondered if their deaths were just accidents or if something worse happened. His life was always surrounded by sadness, pain, and darkness. Jerry Lee Lewis's music made him famous, but he hurt many people along the way. 19. Axl Rose. The lead singer for the band Guns N' Roses, Axl Rose was loved for his music, but his personal life was a mess. He hurt the women he dated because he was dishonest and unfaithful. Pretending to love deeply, he used his charm to control people. His relationships always ended badly because he wasn't trustworthy. Even as he grew older, Axl didn't change, always hurting others. People remember him for his music, but also for the pain he caused. Playing guitar in the same band as Axl Rose, Slash was also famous but had his own problems. He lived a life filled with bad choices and didn't even try to be faithful. Treating women like they weren't important, he moved quickly from one to another without caring about their feelings. His first marriage to Renee Saran looked great from the outside, but inside it was filled with lies. Slash secretly dated many women while married. Eventually, Renee couldn't handle the hurt anymore and ended the marriage. He married again, this time to Perla Ferrar. At first, things seemed better, but he returned to his old habits. Slash continued seeing other women, causing pain once again. In 2014, Perla decided to leave him because she couldn't accept his constant cheating anymore. Even after his second marriage ended, he didn't change. Slash kept dating many women without caring about loyalty or feelings. He became famous through his music, but he is also remembered for his inability to be faithful or respectful to others. 21. Tommy Lee. A famous drummer in the band Motley Crue, Tommy Lee was known for living a wild life. He loved parties, music, and being famous, but he often hurt people close to him because he was not faithful. Married to Heather Locklear in the 1980s, Tommy seemed happy, but he had many girlfriends behind her back. Heather soon found out the truth and felt very hurt. She left him in 1993 because he could not be loyal to her. Later, he married Pamela Anderson. They tied the knot after just 4 days together. At first, their marriage seemed full of excitement, but soon Tommy started acting the same way again. He lied and had relationships with other women. Pamela was hurt many times and ended the marriage in 1998. Even after that, he did not change. Tommy's life showed the dark side of being a famous rock star, hurting others while chasing fun. 22. Nikki Sixx. Playing bass guitar in Motley Crue, Nikki Sixx lived a life full of danger and bad choices. He used substances and often lied to the people he loved, doing things without caring about the results. Writing a book about his life called The Heroin Diaries, Nikki talked openly about hurting people he loved. Married to Brandy Brandt, he had children, but while she cared for their kids, he secretly dated many women. At first, he did not feel bad about it. His actions hurt his family and ended the marriage. After that, he married Donna DeRico, but he acted the same way again. Nikki was not good at staying faithful and often hurt the feelings of people who trusted him. In 2014, he married Courtney Bingham and tried to change and live a better life. Later, Nikki admitted he acted badly because he felt insecure. Still, his past actions made it hard for others to trust him again. 23. Vince Neil. His first wife was Beth Lynn. When Vince became famous, he could not resist partying and meeting other women. He did not even try to hide what he did. His marriage to Beth did not last long because she was tired of being hurt. Marrying Charisse Rudie. Next, Vince had a child with her, but he still could not change his ways. He often disappeared to party and spent time with other women. Charisse felt very sad and betrayed, so she left him. Later, he married Leah Gerardini. Even though he was older, Vince still could not stay faithful. He never said sorry for hurting others and always did what he wanted. 24. Bret Michaels. The famous singer for the band Poison, Bret Michaels was loved by fans for his cool style, big smile, and confident attitude on stage. But behind his rock star image, he had a secret side, one that often betrayed people who cared about him, hurting their feelings. Known for having many relationships, Bret often dated multiple people at the same time. Newspapers frequently wrote about his personal life because it was full of drama. His most famous scandal happened in the 1990s when he had an affair with Pamela Anderson, who was married at the time. While Pamela faced heavy criticism, Bret continued living the same way, juggling multiple girlfriends. His habit of being unfaithful wasn't just a short phase, it lasted many years. Always choosing excitement and new relationships over loyalty, he later starred in a TV show called Rock of Love, where women competed for his attention. This show made it clear that he had no interest in settling down. Many people who knew him shared how Brett would leave them once the excitement was over. Even though he had money, fame, and fans, he struggled to truly connect with someone. Some wondered if being famous made him act this way, or if it was just part of who he was. 25. David Lee Roth. The lead singer of the band Van Halen, David Lee Roth was known for his wild performances and exciting personality. Famous both on stage and off, he never followed the rules, especially when it came to relationships. David didn't hide his actions. He was proud of them. During Van Halen's most popular years, he was known for dating many different women, often bragging about how many girlfriends he had. For David, dating was like a game. He enjoyed meeting new people every day, and relationships never lasted long. Even when other rock stars began to settle down and get married, he refused to change. David never got married and never apologized for the way he lived. He believed that being in a relationship meant losing freedom, which he didn't want. People still wonder if he just didn't want to grow up, or if he was the last person to live that wild rock star life. Either way, David Lee Roth's story is tied to both his music and his choices. To some, he was a hero of freedom. To others, he showed that even famous people can have a dark side.